and welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and this is my November pile of possibilities. In my video yesterday, I shared with you the books that I am intending to read for the C.S. Lewis Readathon that is coming up in November, which I think is tomorrow. I'm a little confused because I'm filming this ahead of time. I don't know what date it is, but anyways. Coming up soon is the C.S. Lewis Readathon in November, and I have a whole pile of possibilities for that readathon. And I will mention those here today, but I also want to show you the other books that I intend to read for other things going on in the month of November. So first of all, just to recap, for the C.S. Lewis Readathon, some of my picks are David Brainerd's personal testimony. He was a missionary in the 18th century to the American Indians, and this is an Christian autobiography for that prompt. And then we have Lady Susan by Jane Austen as being a book that inspired C.S. Lewis. Now, I don't know that Lady Susan in particular inspired him, but Jane Austen as an author inspired him, and so we're going with that. And then for the middle grade or fantasy prompt, I'm going to read After Alice, which is kind of a combination of the two of those. Although I don't know that this book is particularly middle grade. It's playing off of Alice in Wonderland, which I would describe as children's literature or middle grade. And it's definitely fantastical. So that one fits for that prompt. And then for the epistolary prompt, I am going with Gilead by Marilynne Robinson, and gonna try and make myself get to this one for sure. I am reading the group read Miracles, which also goes with the Christian nonfiction prompt. And I am reading Remarkably Bright Creatures, which goes with the female main character prompt. And The House of Hawthorne, which is about Nathaniel Hawthorne and his wife, which goes for the stubborn characters prompt. And I know that because the inside flap describes Nathaniel Hawthorne and his wife as being two soulful, strong-willed people. Sounds pretty stubborn to me. So I'm hoping to get to that. That's a library book. But those are all pile of possibilities for the most part. I'll go over in a second which ones are my definite commitments for the month of November. But a lot of those are just pile of possibility type books that I will get to as the mood strikes. I also, in that readathon, am hoping to get to the second book in the Recorder series by Cathy McCrumb. Cannot remember the name of it, but that is the second book, and I want to get to that. That goes for the sci-fi prompt. And then I also want to read a play by Dorothy Sayers. I have a book of plays by her on my Kindle, and I read one last year, so I will read another one from that. And I think that covers all of the prompts for the C.S. Lewis Readathon. So I also am doing Chantel's Read Your Shelf Challenge, of course, and for the month of November, the prompt is to read a book that intimidates me. Chantel, I don't like this prompt. I don't like it. So rude. Anyways, just kidding, of course. I have a couple of options, and I actually have a lot of options, but these are the most likely. So first of all, Gilead, you might maybe be able to throw in there. Not that it intimidates me, it's just I know that from the bit of it that I have read, like it's slower moving and that sort of thing. So that doesn't intimidate me. I'm just not always in the mood for that. So maybe. This one definitely is a little bit intimidating. I do want to read something by Cormac McCarthy. I've never read anything by him. I want to, just to see what his work is like. It is a little bit intimidating. I don't particularly like it when authors stretch the bounds of their narrative style. If it's not really well done, it just ends up being edgy, and I don't know. I'm not interested in jumping on that bandwagon. Just give me a well-told story. I'm not interested in pushing envelopes of narrative style and that kind of thing. So I'm not really interested in that sort of thing. And I know that Cormac McCarthy has that in this book. I know there's like dialogue without punctuation. And also I've heard that this can be really brutal in this story. So I don't know. It intimidates me a little bit in both its style and content. So we'll see. I do want to read it though. At least try it. However, I have backup ideas because I already DNF'd my, I think it was my September read for Chantel's Read Your Shelf challenge. And so I don't want to DNF again and have a DNF for that challenge. So if I end up DNFing this, which I may, I don't know, we'll see if I push through it or not. But if I end up DNFing it, I may go for the Aeneid by Virgil, which my son is reading in school this year. Now, I think he's reading it later in the school year, but it's definitely one that intimidates me only because I don't particularly have an interest in ancient Greek and Roman literature. Like, it doesn't interest me. And it just seems so ancient and far removed. I have read some things. I had to read some things in high school, and I've read, a smidgen of things since then. And it's not like I hated what I have read. It doesn't appeal to me, and it's just a little bit intimidating being so far removed from my daily life. So that would be another option. So as intimidating books. And then for the Tea and Ink Society's Read the Classics Challenge, the November prompt was to read a friend recommendation. So I actually asked for friend recommendations on my YouTube community tab, but I forgot to specify that it had to be a classic. So I got some great recommendations, but none of them were for classics. So most of them were not. I think one may have been, but I went ahead and asked in my reading group that I'm in with my friends and my sisters, and my sister listed a whole bunch of classics that she recommended that were her favorites. And one of them was The Scarlet Pimpernel, which I have read, but it was on my list to reread for this year, and I have not gotten to it yet. It's been on my TBR a couple of times, and I just haven't read it yet. So this will be the thing that makes me actually read it this time in November. So it is a reread, but I'm sure that still counts for the prompt, and it was recommended to me by my sister, so there we go. And then I'm also participating in the Montgomery challenge that is hosted by Mitzi and a couple of other channels. I can't remember exactly who all is hosting it with her. I will put all of their names and channels in the description. But they have a group read, A Tangled Web by Lucy Maud Montgomery, which I don't have a physical copy of at the moment, but I am planning to read that group read in November. And that also counts for the prompt to read a buddy read. So I'll be reading it with the whole group, so that counts as a buddy read. And then one of the prompts is to read something that is Anne related. So it is related to Anne of Green Gables. And as most of you know, if you've been following me this year, I have been slowly rereading the Anne of Green Gables series in its entirety. And the next one up is Anne of Ingleside. And Taylor at Tales and Trees with Tay gave me this book earlier this year, this lovely vintage copy. And so I'm hoping to read Anne of Ingleside in November for that one. And then the puffed sleeves prompt is to read a book that has a character with, and it doesn't have to be Anne, it can be another Lucy Maud Montgomery character with puffed sleeves on the front or beautiful sleeves. And so I have Emily of New Moon, and also another prompt is to read a book that is not Anne related, and so this is not Anne related, so that also covers that prompt. So I'm hoping to read Emily of New Moon for that. So Emily of New Moon, Tangled Web, and Anne of Ingleside for the more Montgomery. But as for the books that I'm actually committing myself to read in November, and the other ones will be just what I can fit in. Miracles, the group read for the C.S. Lewis Readathon. And Remarkably Bright Creatures, which is also part of the C.S. Lewis Readathon and was recommended to me by a friend. And then Anne of Ingleside, I really want to get to this because reading these is part of my whole rereading for this year, so that knocks that off. I will at least start this. I'm not making promises about finishing it, but I'm definitely going to start that. And I'm definitely going to read The Scarlet Pimpernel because that goes for my reading challenge. And I have read all of the other prompts this year for these two challenges that these books represent, so I don't want to fail in November. So I definitely need to get to those. Next in priority, although not as definite as those, are A Tangled Web, which is the Lucy Maud Montgomery, the more Montgomery group read. The House of Hawthorne, because I need to return it to the library. And Lady Susan, because it's the last one I need to reread for my Jane Austen rereads. And yeah, those are the main ones, the secondary ones that I am committing to get to. So that's actually not a very big stack. It's a little bit of a dense stack, but it's not a very big stack. These are the ones that I will definitely be reading in November, and the others are bonus if I get to them. So hello, future Anne here. Although by the time you watch this, it's gonna be past Anne again. But anyway, to add a few things that I forgot to my November TBR, because I don't know how. I totally, when I was making my TBR, completely forgot about Historathon, which is another one of my favorites on BookTube. I love historical fiction, and this is right up my alley, my favorite kind of reading. So I'm definitely adding to my pile of possibilities. These are totally like mood read sort of things that, yes, I'm going to enjoy digging into as many of these as I can find time for. We'll see. Anyway, so Historathon is hosted this year by Gloria Z. Thompson and a couple of other channels, and I will link to them in the description box. And there are, I believe, 9 prompts with a super cute little bingo board graphic, and you can, you know, read one or as many as you want and double up on them, whatever. So the first prompt is historical era exploration, and I am going to read a book that has been on my physical TBR that I really want to read, called Out of the Easy, and it is set in New Orleans during the 1950s, which is definitely a time and place, particularly the combination of those two things, but also the 50s. Like there's so much World War II fiction, but the decade right after that kind of gets lost in the shuffle. So this one is set in the 50s in New Orleans, and I am looking forward to reading that by Ruta Sepetys. The next prompt is a famous historical figure. So reading a book about a famous historical figure. This one, famous might be stretching it a little bit, but she's definitely connected to a famous figure. This is Hanging Mary, and she is connected to John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated President Lincoln. And she was definitely part of, or is assumed to have been part, and was convicted and executed for being part of the ring of people who pulled off the assassination. John Wilkes Booth did not work independently. There were other people involved, and she is assumed to have been involved in that. And so this book is about her, Hanging Mary, and that is by Susan Higginbottom, who I met at a book festival that I went to earlier this year. Is a local author to me, so I'm really interested in digging into that book by her, which I've had out from the library for a while, and I need to read it before I have to return it. And then the next one is historical romance, which is right up my alley. I have a couple of options. One, you've already seen this one, and this fits a couple of things. That is The House of Hawthorne, and this is about the romance of Nathaniel Hawthorne and his wife and their relationship. And this also fits a prompt for the C.S. Lewis challenge, and it is going to fit, you'll see again in this one. Other options, I have here this whole stack of books that I got from my sister with Regency romance novels by Elizabeth Mansfield. And so I have multiple options there of quick, easy reads that I can pick for that prompt. Then for historical mysteries, I have one on my Kindle that I'm actually currently reading. I have borrowed it from the library, and that is The Murder of Mr. Wickham by Claudia L. Gray. And I've already started it, but it's going to take me into this next week because I'm kind of reading it in between other things. So that is also going to go be applied to my November TBR. And that is a mystery set in the late Regency era England, and it is based on characters from Jane Austen's novels plus their offspring. The next prompt is about social issues and cultural perspectives, and I have 2 options. I'm not sure which one I will end up going with if I get to either of them, but I have 2 options. One is Hang 1,000 Trees with Ribbons by Anne Rinaldi, which is about Phyllis Wheatley, who was a Black poet in the colonial era in America. So obviously during the time of slavery, and she lived in the northern part in New England, in Boston actually. And I actually was reminded of her when we were in Boston earlier this year, and that's why I picked up this book, but I have not read it yet. So I do want to read this one. And then also Only the Beautiful
by Susan Meissner, which I picked up on vacation in Greenville earlier this year and haven't read yet. Helen, one of the main characters, discovers a shocking American eugenics program and learns that while the war was on in Europe, World War II, there are still battles to be fought at home. And so this tackles the topic of eugenics. So that is very interesting, and I really want to read that one. I don't love everything I've read by Susan Meissner, but she's definitely an amazing writer. So I am looking forward to reading that one. And then we have a historical fiction adaptation. And this is another one that I'm actually able to double up on other things that I'm doing for November. And one of those was to read a book that was recommended to me. And that is Scarlet Pimpernel, which my sister read to me, which I have read before. But also it fits the prompt for a historical fiction adaptation because there is a movie starring Jane Seymour that's really good. And it's based on the Scarlet Pimpernel and another book by, I believe, the same author. So it doesn't follow the book super closely, but there's a lot of it that is in the book. So anyway, I am going to read that one. And that is like another reread for me, which I've been wanting to do for several months now and just haven't yet. The next prompt is a strong sense of place. And I don't have anything that really sticks out to me as being applicable for that prompt. So we're kind of gonna play that by ear and see what happens as the month goes on and what I read. Then we have a nonfiction hybrid, and that's where I said, you will see this one again, House of Hawthorne. This is part biography, part novel, which is one of my favorite genres. And then finally, War and Conflict, a book set during a time of war or featuring a conflict. And I'm going to read A Mask of Honor by Sharon Burtz, who is another local author to me. And this is another library book that I need to read sooner rather than later. And it is, let me just tell you what it's about. In this coming of age tale set in early 19th century America, two sons of the Virginia aristocracy risk it all to defend their dreams and determine their own destinies. General Armistead Mason and John Jack Mason McCarthy are brothers-in-law, second cousins, and descendants of founding father George Mason IV. I was just at George Mason University the other day. Ambitious and headstrong, together they set out to find love, acceptance, and honor on their own merit. Armistead, by nature a politician, demands respect and strives for perfection. Jack, by inclination a rover, looks to forge his own path. When Armistead is challenged by corruption in the political machine and is denied a seat in the U.S. Congress, the two become embroiled in a bitter dispute that sets in motion an irrevocable chain of events, leading them to the dueling grounds and an outcome that changes everything. Based on historical events of the 1819 Mason-McCarthy duel, Mask of Honor is a story of courage, conviction, and the cost of sacrificing one life to forge another. So there is definitely conflict in that story for sure. And I love this map on the end papers. This is my county. So those are the books that I am adding to my November TBR as pile possibilities, options, mood reads. The library books are the priority, as are anything that is also overlapped with other parts of my November TBR and fits my other goals for the year. So we'll see which one of these I get to, which I have time to read. Who knows? Anyway, so that is the end of my November TBR. I can't add anything more to the list. We're done. Okay? It's final now. See you next time. Bye.